Supply chains are all about making products and getting them to consumers at the right price and in good time. It sounds simple enough. But the COVID-19 pandemic showed up the weaknesses in the global supply chain. To avoid disruptions to their operations, manufacturers will have to think about building resilience in their supply chains. One key aspect of resilience is to have diverse sources of supplies. This means having many local or regional supply sources versus sourcing from one single supplier globally.
In manufacturing, you need many components for your final product. And within that, many products could be coming from the different areas, which means that now you need to think diversification. A diversification of more sources, closer, but not necessarily all at one part as well. We need to learn on diversification. That means some parts you still allow it to be done, for example, in China. Some parts you may be doing in the whole ASEAN context.
Contract manufacturer Jabil has adopted a diverse sourcing strategy since the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan.
If you look at the types of disruptions that can be created to the supply chain, you have what we talk about, the floods in Thailand, the tsunami in Japan. Those are natural disasters that we can't predict, so that's one. You also have things that you see that you cannot influence, geopolitical tensions, tariffs and whatnot. Those are things that you have no opportunity to be able to impact, right? And you also have accidents, factories in fires.
Besides sourcing from different locations, businesses are also looking at multiple manufacturing locations and relocating closer to their end consumers.
The shorter the supply chain, the more responsive it will be. The longer you string out the supply chain, it's just the opportunities of disruption throughout the entire chain, it's going to be longer.
The sheer scale of COVID-19 has, however, made it even more challenging to manage supply chain risks.
It's kind of a global impact, right? And that affected many countries and many industries at the same time. So it would have been hard, right, to actually be able to plan for such a black swan event like this.
But here's the dilemma. Reducing risk to a minimum or even zero carries a price, and such costs could prove to be so high that the business model becomes unviable.
Having a local regional supply chain versus that of a global one, the trade-off that brings, the understanding of what is economy of scale, right? Having one large mega factory that drives on efficiency versus having smaller factories that is potentially a little bit more adverse to, single locational shock, but may not be as efficient. Are we looking at it from predominantly a cost optimization model or something that is pivoting a little bit more towards, looking at risk? How do we manage the risk in supply chains?
COVID-19 is also prompting manufacturers to revisit the just-in-time manufacturing concept and relook just-in-case manufacturing.
The movement of goods and services, certain parts, certain components, high-value items that you need to produce your final product. And that certainly has disrupted the old ideology of having things that just come just right in time for the production has to be rethink as well. Maybe you need to have a certain stockpile of your materials.
Stockpiling inventories gives a manufacturer some resilience against shocks, but will push up costs as well.
It's always a balance. You need to have certain levels of buffer stock, versus being very lean and just in time. And I think the overall balance has definitely shifted to having more just in case mentality as well.
Jabil's Mr. Ng thinks otherwise.
Holding inventory is probably one of the least efficient use of working capital. I don't think that's going to be an industrial-wide pivot to just-in-case inventory.
He believes manufacturers should hold inventory only for unique parts or components.
If you are able to design diversity and flexibility around everything else, you may be left with 5-10% of the components that, because of the performance requirements, because of the lack of supplies, right? You have to be using a very restrictive core group of suppliers. Then you will have strategies that you want to develop to manage that. And one of that strategy can be holding safety inventory.
Manufacturing is adapting to a new normal. How it will evolve is still uncertain. But the Singapore Manufacturing Federation has this vision for the industry.
In the olden days, before you can play that game, you need a hardware, right? You need a box that manufactured in a factory. But today, the person manufactured the game in a digital world, and it is pumped out into the rest of the players around the world via digital means. When the game becomes very exciting in the digital world, people will want better monitor, people will want better accessories. Thereafter, you can continue manufacturing other things.